The Cedar Ridge Loop simmered under a late afternoon sun, the air thick with the sweet, smoky perfume of grilling burgers and ribs. A vibrant symphony of children's laughter, mostly in English but liberally sprinkled with excited Spanish exclamations, rose from the communal green space at the road's end. The annual neighborhood cookout was in full swing, a cheerful mosaic of picnic blankets, shared salads, and easy conversation. Carlos Ramirez, momentarily free from the mantle of his state highway patrol commander role, relaxed in jeans and a polo shirt, watching his 7-year-old son Miguel. Miguel, a small dynamo fueled by sunshine and sugar, darted between laughing friends, chasing a bright red ball across the grass, his giggles infectious. Elena, Carlos's wife, smiled, handing him a brimming plate. She leaned against his shoulder, a brief, cherished moment of peace amidst the happy bustle. This rare Saturday off felt restorative, grounded in simple belonging. But across the Circle Drive, perched on the immaculate porch of her beige colonial, Patricia Davenport offered a stark counterpoint. Disapproval radiated from her like a physical force. Her arms were clamped tightly across her chest, lips compressed into their customary thin line of judgment. Patricia, a widow in her early 60s with rigidly coiffed blonde hair and an unshakable air of brittle superiority, was a veteran of multiple HOA committees. She viewed herself as the vigilant guardian of Cedar Ridge's essential character, a character defined, in her mind, by quiet decorum, established routines, and the exclusive use of English. The influx of Hispanic families, like the Ramirezes, into the newer phase of the development represented a worrisome erosion of this ideal. Her discontent typically surfaced indirectly. Anonymous notes regarding lawn maintenance standards, pointed remarks about loud music during family gatherings, a calculated, frosty silence when Spanish drifted her way. Today, the exuberant mix of cultures, the blended languages, the unfamiliar spices mingling with the scent of barbecue. It all seemed to visibly offend her deeply ingrained sense of order. It felt like an invasion. Suddenly, the cheerful soundscape fractured. A cry, high-pitched and sharp with real fear, sliced through the playful shrieks. Miguel. He had stumbled near a dense cluster of flowering lantana bordering the green, his small hands clawing frantically at his neck. His face, moments before flushed with exertion, was rapidly paling, replaced by an alarming puffiness spreading like spilled ink. Elena reached him in an instant, her heart seizing. Carlos was right behind her, his commander's instincts overriding his parental panic. A small, angry red welt pulsed visibly on Miguel's neck. A bee sting. Elena's breath caught in a silent gasp of terror. She saw the terrifyingly swift swelling around his lips, heard the faint but distinct whistling sound. Wheezing, as he struggled desperately to draw air into his tightening lungs. Anaphylaxis, the known, dreaded allergy. Their worst nightmare, unfolding in seconds. The EpiPen. Dios mío, el EpiPen. Elena screamed, her fingers scrabbling frantically inside her large canvas tote bag, scattering sunscreen tubes and juice boxes. Carlos, his mind already a blur of protocols and worst-case scenarios, was dialing 911. His voice remained steady, betraying none of the ice-cold fear gripping his chest. Anaphylactic shock, he reported, concise and clear. Pediatric male, age 7, bee sting confirmed. Location Cedar Ridge Circle Green, end of the main residential loop. Respiratory distress, severe reaction, progressing rapidly. Requesting immediate ALS response. Elena's trembling fingers finally closed around the life-saving device. Years of practicing the motions, praying they would remain mere practice, kicked in through the fog of panic. She pulled off the safety cap, positioned the auto-injector firmly against Miguel's small outer thigh through his shorts, and pressed down hard, holding it for the mandatory 10 count. Miguel gasped, a strangled, terrifying sound. His eyes, wide with fear, locked onto his mother's. Angry red hives blossomed across his pale skin like warning flares. The epinephrine was a critical intervention, a biological firefight, but potentially only a delaying action. He needed advanced airway management, steroids, monitoring. He needed a hospital. Now, neighbors, alerted by Elena's scream and the sudden, palpable shift in atmosphere, began to gather, their faces etched with concern and helplessness. Offers of water, shade, assistance were murmured, hesitant intrusions into the bubble of parental terror. The festive energy had vanished utterly, sucked away by the vacuum of emergency. A thick, anxious silence descended, broken only by Miguel's increasingly desperate, high-pitched gasps for air and Elena's low, urgent Spanish whispers. Respira, mi amor. Breathe with mommy. Stay with me. Respira. Then, a sound cutting through the tension, the distant, unmistakable rise and fall of an approaching ambulance siren. It grew steadily louder, closer, a beacon of hope materializing from the ether. A collective murmur of relief went through the small crowd. Help was arriving. But as the large, boxy ambulance turned off the main road, navigating the narrow entrance street leading into the residential loop, its emergency lights strobing against the trees, Patricia Davenport executed her plan. A look of chilling, almost gleeful calculation settled onto her features. Ignoring the concerned calls of "What's wrong?" from nearby onlookers, she slipped quickly from her porch. She hurried to the large, gleaming white SUV parked squarely in her driveway, a vehicle often cited in her own complaints about neighbors parking slightly over sidewalk lines. She started the engine, reversed a few feet with jarring speed, then deliberately angled the SUV forward, driving it completely across the narrow entrance road. It formed a solid, impassable metal barricade. The ambulance, approaching at cautious speed but still needing room to maneuver, braked hard, its siren dying with an abrupt, choked gasp just feet from the unexpected obstacle. Patricia switched off the SUV's engine but pointedly left the keys dangling in the ignition. She stepped out onto the pavement, already raising her smartphone, her thumb jabbing the record button. A strange, feverish light burned in her eyes. She seemed almost energized by the crisis. "This stops now," she announced, her voice pitched unnaturally loud, ringing with a bizarre mix of self-importance and raw, unfiltered malice. She began panning her phone slowly across the stunned faces of the neighbors gathered near Miguel, then towards the blocked ambulance. This is what you get," she continued, her voice rising, becoming shrill, gesturing wildly towards the Ramirez family. "You people. You move in here. You bring your noise, your disrespect. You don't even try to speak English." She took a step forward, emboldened. "You break all the rules. HOA rules. Parking, music, everything." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by angry murmurs. "Patricia, for God's sake, what are you doing?" shouted Tom Henderson, the retired firefighter who lived next door to her. He took an instinctive, protective step towards the Ramirezes. "Move that damned vehicle. There's a child choking over here." Patricia whipped her head towards him, her face contorted with fury. "He needs to learn English," she shrieked back, briefly aiming her phone's camera at Tom before swinging it back towards the ambulance. Two paramedics, grabbing essential gear bags, were getting out, their expressions quickly morphing from confusion to disbelief, then to controlled anger. "This is America," Patricia screamed, her voice cracking with the intensity of her outburst. "You learn the language, or you go back where you came from. This is our neighborhood. We have standards here. Decency. No Espanol screamed all day. Understand." She paused, taking a ragged, deliberate breath, her eyes scanning the horrified faces defiantly. "We don't need illegal aliens bringing their third-world problems and their diseases here." The paramedics, lugging a heavy advanced life support kit and an oxygen cylinder, hurried towards the SUV blockade, their faces set and grim. "Ma'am, you need to move this vehicle immediately," the lead paramedic commanded, his voice tight, with barely contained professional urgency. "We have a pediatric emergency. A child is in critical respiratory failure. That is not my problem." Patricia spat back, planting her feet firmly, holding her ground like a soldier defending a post. Her phone remained aloft, steadily recording her tirade, documenting her own felony in progress. "They shouldn't be calling you anyway. Let them call their own people. Maybe someone who understands. Whatever that gibberish is they keep yelling." She gestured contemptuously towards Elena. Carlos Ramirez watched this grotesque theater unfold, a terrifying, preternatural calm settling over him. It was the calm of command in chaos, the practiced suppression of personal emotion in the face of operational necessity. The raw, visceral fear for his son's life battled against the ice-cold fury of a veteran officer witnessing an unthinkable, malicious obstruction of life-saving aid. He risked a glance at Miguel. The boy's lips were now undeniably blue, cyanotic. The wheezing sound, the stridor, was higher, tighter, a desperate whistle indicating near-total airway obstruction. The EpiPen had bought minutes, but the reaction was overwhelming it. There was no time left for reasoning with Patricia's venomous delusion. No time for negotiation. No time for waiting. His training, his position, the sheer, primal desperation of a father, it all fused into a single, decisive pathway. He turned abruptly away from Patricia's hateful spectacle, pulling out his SHP-issued smartphone. He bypassed the standard 911 dispatch channels. His thumb flew across the screen with practiced speed, dialing a number burned into his memory, the direct, secure line to the State Highway Patrol Aviation Unit's Regional Command Center. "This is Commander Ramirez," he stated, his voice low, clipped, devoid of inflection, instantly commanding attention on the other end. "Declaring priority 0 medical emergency. Pediatric anaphylaxis, airway compromised, progressing critical. Location is Cedar Ridge Residential Circle. Coordinates transmitting now." He glanced briefly at his phone's GPS display, reading the numbers aloud. "Civilian paramedic unit is on scene but physically blocked by hostile civilian vehicle obstruction. Assailant is actively hostile. Obstruction appears racially motivated. Assailant is recording event." He took a quick, steadying breath. "Air 1 is currently airborne on Traffic Patrol Sector 7, correct?" A brief pause for confirmation. "Affirmative. I am diverting Air 1 to my position effective immediately for hover insertion of tactical medical team. Advise ground units responding code 3 of air asset deployment. Time is the absolute critical factor. Authorize immediate execution." A tense silence stretched, broken only by Miguel's fading gasps, and Patricia's continued, though slightly less confident, ranting at the stone-walled paramedics. Doubt gnawed for a split second. Would they get there in time? Was the airway already lost? Then, faintly at first, a familiar sound cutting through the humid air, growing rapidly, insistently louder. The unmistakable, rhythmic whump-whump-whump of heavy rotor blades beating the atmosphere into submission. Head snapped upwards, necks craned, eyes searching the clear blue sky. Appearing suddenly, dramatically, over the tall line of oak trees bordering the development, the sleek, blue and silver State Highway Patrol helicopter materialized like an avenging angel. Emblazoned with the distinctive gold SHP star, Air 1 descended rapidly, its powerful turbines screaming. It wasn't aiming for a landing zone. The grassy circle was too small, too crowded. Instead, the pilot executed a maneuver of breathtaking skill, bringing the aircraft into a precise, rock-steady hover about 50 feet above the center of the green. The powerful rotor wash blasted downwards like a contained hurricane, whipping leaves, paper plates, and stray napkins into a frantic vortex. Loose picnic blankets billowed violently. The sound was immense, overwhelming. Patricia Davenport finally faltered. Her rant died in her throat. Her mouth fell open, her smartphone lowering slightly as she stared, utterly dumbfounded, at the imposing military-grade aircraft dominating the airspace directly above the gathering she held in such contempt. A wave of shocked, awed murmurs swept through the onlookers. From the helicopter's open side door, a thin but incredibly strong hoist cable snaked down towards the ground. Two figures, clad in dark blue SHP tactical flight suits adorned with clear paramedic insignia patches, moved with practiced ease, expertly attaching themselves to the cable's hook. They were lowered swiftly, smoothly, descending through the rotor wash, landing with professional lightness on the grass just yards from where Elena knelt protectively beside Miguel, shielding his face from the swirling debris. They carried compact, advanced life support packs and specialized pediatric airway equipment. Their movements were economical, intensely focused, radiating an aura of calm competence amidst the surrounding chaos. Ignoring the standoff at the entrance, disregarding Patricia's futile blockade as if it were nothing more than an irrelevant garden gnome, they immediately knelt beside Miguel and took charge of his care. Their calm professionalism was a stark, sudden contrast to the escalating hysteria and hate. Simultaneously, the wail of multiple sirens reached a crescendo. SHB cruisers, lights ablaze, sirens screaming, converged on the entrance to the quiet residential street, only to be brought up short by Patricia's white SUV. Local police department units arrived seconds later, adding to the flashing lights and official presence. Troopers and officers spilled out, weapons secured but stances alert, quickly taking in the extraordinary scene. The blocked ambulance, the hovering helicopter actively deploying personnel, the crowd of agitated witnesses pointing furiously towards Patricia Davenport. Carlos, maintaining his position near the tactical medics now intensely focused on Miguel, but projecting an undeniable field of command authority, pointed a steady, unwavering finger directly at Patricia. "Trooper," he called out, his voice cutting through the noise of the rotors and the murmuring crowd. "Detain that woman." Now, he strode purposefully towards the arriving ground units, meeting the first sergeant on scene. Charges will include felony obstruction of emergency medical services, multiple counts of reckless endangerment, potential false imprisonment of the paramedics, and clear violations under state hate crime statutes. The specific codes weren't necessary. The situation screamed probable cause. She deliberately, knowingly used her vehicle to block ambulance access during a pediatric life-threatening emergency. The vehicle is instrumentality. Secure her phone. She's been actively recording her actions and statements, likely live streaming. Preserve it as primary evidence. I also need the ambulance unit's dashcam footage impounded. Statements from every single witness here. The troopers moved with swift, decisive, practiced efficiency. Patricia started to sputter again, a flicker of defiance returning. "You can't arrest me. This is private property. I know my rights. I was just upholding community standards. This is harassment." Her protests dissolved into incoherent babbling as two stern-faced troopers took firm control of her arms, maneuvered her resisting body against the side of her own SUV, and expertly applied handcuffs behind her back. Her Miranda rights were recited loudly and clearly, each word seeming to land like a physical blow. Pale with shock, disbelief finally dawning, she was placed securely in the back of a patrol car. Another trooper carefully retrieved her smartphone, its screen still active, and placed it meticulously into a sealed evidence bag, noting the make, model, and approximate recording time. The keys were plucked from the SUV's ignition, and the vehicle was quickly backed out of the roadway by an officer, finally clearing the path for the initial ambulance crew, who now looked on with a mixture of relief and professional indignation. The SHP tactical paramedics worked with breathtaking speed and focused intensity. They had already established intravenous access and administered further potent medications, epinephrine, high-dose steroids, antihistamines, directly into Miguel's bloodstream. His breathing, however, remained critically shallow, his oxygen saturation perilously low despite the oxygen mask. Recognizing the imminent danger of complete respiratory arrest and potential brain damage, they made the critical decision. Secure the airway. Now, performing a rapid sequence intubation under challenging field conditions, they expertly inserted a pediatric endotracheal tube, confirming placement with practiced skill. They connected an ambo bag and began manually ventilating Miguel's lungs with high-flow oxygen. The difference was almost immediate, visually dramatic. The terrifying bluish tinge around Miguel's lips began to recede, replaced by a healthier pink. His chest rose and fell rhythmically with each squeeze of the bag. The terrifying stridor vanished, replaced by the quiet puff of air moving through the tube. Within minutes that had stretched into an agonizing eternity for Carlos and Elena, they had stabilized Miguel sufficiently for immediate air transport. The helicopter's hoist line returned, lowering a specialized pediatric evacuation stretcher basket. Miguel was carefully secured within it, vital sign monitors rechecked, for lines secured against movement. One of the tactical paramedics clipped himself securely onto the stretcher frame beside his small patient, ready to manage the airway during the lift. Slowly, carefully, cocooned against the rotor wash, they were lifted upwards, swaying gently beneath the belly of the aircraft, towards the open door where the crew chief waited. Elena, Her face streaked with tears, but her expression a mask of fierce, maternal determination, was helped aboard right behind them by the waiting crew chief. As the hoist cable retracted and the heavy side door began to slide shut, sealing them inside the vibrating belly of the machine, she reached out instinctively, placing her hand gently on Miguel's small chest, feeling the fragile, mechanically assisted rise and fall beneath the thin emergency blanket. The noise inside the helicopter was deafening, a physical presence that vibrated through her bones. The smell of jet fuel and antiseptic was sharp in her nostrils. She closed her eyes for a fleeting, dizzying second, the world tilting. A memory, sharp and unwelcome, flashed behind her eyelids. Miguel is a chubby toddler, happily eating bright red strawberries at a sunny park picnic, and then the sudden, terrifying eruption of hives across his little body. The panicked rush to the ER. The allergist's grave face days later, the careful explanation of anaphylaxis, the EpiPen prescriptions, the constant, low-grade hum of anxiety that had become the background score of her life ever since. Dios mío, protegio. Now, that background hum had exploded into a roaring, terrifying crescendo. She opened her eyes, forcing herself to focus fiercely on her son's still face, on the rhythmic puff of the ventilation bag, whispering prayers in Spanish, fragments of childhood faith surfacing in the face of overwhelming fear. Stay with me, mi vida. Stay? Carlos watched them ascend, his heart clenching painfully in his chest as the helicopter climbed, banked sharply, and accelerated, the powerful roar of its engines finally diminishing as it sped towards the Level 1 trauma center downtown. Only when it was a receding speck against the blue did the rigid control holding him upright seem to fracture. The adrenaline surge ebbed, leaving behind a deep, bone-shaking exhaustion and the raw, undiluted terror of the last 20 minutes. He sagged heavily against the rough bark of a nearby oak tree, dragging in a deep, shuddering breath that felt like his first in an hour. He forced himself to push away from the tree, to reassume his role, to focus. Troopers were methodically, patiently collecting witness statements, their notebooks filling rapidly. Neighbors, shaken but resolute, their earlier fear replaced by cold anger, recounted Patricia's hateful words, her deliberate actions blocking the ambulance, her chilling, dismissive lack of concern for a child struggling for breath. The original ambulance crew provided their own detailed, professional report of the obstruction, their frustration evident. The evidence against Patricia Davenport was overwhelming, damning, multifaceted, and ironically, significantly self-provided through her own ill-conceived attempt to document her perceived victimhood. The story, amplified by the dramatic visuals and the high-profile nature of the victim's father, exploded. Multiple neighbors had recorded key segments of the incident on their phones. Combined with Patricia's own partially captured livestream footage, already screen-recorded and shared thousands of times by outraged viewers before authorities could take it down, and the stunning images of the helicopter rescue circulating online, the incident became instantaneous national news. Headline variations dominated news feeds and social media. HOA Karen from hell. Blocks ambulance. Screams, learn English, as commander's son fights for life. Caught on camera. Woman uses SUV to stop medics reaching dying child. Hero dad. SHP commander calls own helicopter to save son from racist attack. The sheer audacity and cruelty, coupled with the extraordinary rescue, created a perfect storm of public fascination and fury. The backlash against Patricia Davenport was immediate, volcanic, and universal. Condemnation poured in from across the political spectrum. The Cedar Ridge HOA board, finding themselves at the epicenter of a national scandal and facing potentially ruinous legal liability, acted with uncharacteristic speed. They issued a formal, unequivocal public apology to the Ramirez family and the entire community. In an emergency session, fueled by furious resident demands, they voted unanimously to invoke rarely used covenant clauses to pursue maximum available sanctions against Patricia, including initiating legal action to force the sale of her house and obtaining a permanent restraining order banning her from the property. They also publicly committed to a complete overhaul of their leadership structure, mandatory diversity and sensitivity training for all committee members, and establishing a new community relations subcommittee. The investigation quickly uncovered an unexpected layer, thanks to Patricia's own recording. Detectives analyzing the full, unedited footage from her phone discovered segments captured before the main confrontation. In her agitated state while waiting on her porch, she had apparently continued an earlier, heated phone argument, pacing back and forth. The phone's microphone clearly picked up snippets of her hushed but angry conversation referencing missing funds, the audit, and Gary knowing too much. Combined with existing, quiet rumors about HOA financial mismanagement, this accidental self-exposure on her own livestream blew the case wide open. Patricia hadn't just snapped due to prejudice. She was likely terrified of scrutiny, of something else being discovered, and the cookout chaos perhaps seemed like a way to create a diversion or assert control in a desperate, irrational way. Investigators now pursued two parallel tracks: the blatant hate crime and obstruction charges, and a burgeoning investigation into HOA embezzlement, potentially involving Patricia and the hitherto respected treasurer, Gary. Given the clear evidence of racial motivation intertwined with the deliberate, life-threatening interference with emergency services, now compounded by suspected financial crimes, the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division launched a comprehensive federal investigation alongside the state's widening criminal probe. Patricia Davenport found herself drowning in an inescapable legal quagmire. At the state level, multiple counts of felony reckless endangerment, false imprisonment, willful obstruction of emergency medical services, aggravated assault, by creating imminent fear and delaying care, all subject to significant hate crime enhancements. Plus, new charges related to embezzlement and conspiracy. At the federal level, criminal violation of civil rights for interfering with access to emergency services based on race/national origin, and potential wire fraud charges related to the HOA funds. Recognizing the critical public safety message embedded within the horrifying incident, the governor's office coordinated with Commander Carlos Ramirez and the SHB's Public Affairs Division. They produced a stark, simple, yet incredibly powerful bilingual public service announcement. It intercut brief, dramatic footage of emergency vehicles responding Code 3 with quiet scenes of diverse families in everyday settings. It concluded with Commander Ramirez standing resolute in his full dress uniform, looking directly into the camera. "Every second counts in an emergency," he stated, his voice calm but carrying immense weight, first in English, then repeating the identical message firmly in Spanish. "Obstructing first responders, police, fire, paramedics, endangers lives, and is a serious crime. Emergency help is for everyone in our state. The language you speak, your background, where you come from, none of it matters when a life is on the line. Do not delay help. Do not deny compassion. It is the law, and it is the right thing to do." The PSA ran heavily on television, radio, and social media statewide, becoming an instantly recognizable message. Miguel, thanks to the critical minutes bought by Elena's initial EpiPen administration, the incredibly swift response and advanced skills of the SHP tactical medics, and the expert care received at the trauma center, made a full and remarkable recovery. Doctors confirmed that the rapid sequence intubation likely prevented hypoxic brain injury, preserving his future. The Ramirez family, though undeniably shaken and forever changed by the ordeal, found themselves embraced by an outpouring of genuine support and solidarity from their neighbors, including many who had previously kept a polite distance, and from strangers across the country touched by their story. Cedar Ridge, jolted from its comfortable suburban complacency, began a difficult but necessary period of introspection and conversation. Neighbors organized potlucks specifically aimed at cultural exchange, shared stories, attended HOA meetings demanding transparency, and made conscious, individual efforts to bridge divides that had been ignored for too long. The shame of the incident became a catalyst for change. Patricia Davenport's legal battles concluded with predictable, grim finality. Confronted with the overwhelming, irrefutable video evidence from multiple sources, including her own phone, the damning testimony of paramedics, police officers, dozens of civilian witnesses, and the newly uncovered financial crimes, her defense was non-existent. She was convicted on all significant state and federal charges related to the obstruction, the hate crime, and the embezzlement scheme. Her accomplice, The treasurer Gary, facing his own charges, cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for a plea deal. The sentencing judge, visibly angered by the case's details, delivered a blistering condemnation, speaking of her profound lack of empathy, her calculated cruelty motivated by deep-seated prejudice, the extreme danger posed by prioritizing bigotry over a child's fragile life, and her brazen betrayal of her community through financial deceit. Citing the severity and multiplicity of her offenses, the judge sentenced her to a total of 15 years in federal prison, ensuring she would serve significant time. Subsequent civil lawsuits filed by the Ramirez family resulted in judgments that completely stripped Patricia Davenport of every single asset. Her house, the symbol of her perceived status, her savings, her investments, were all liquidated to pay compensatory and punitive damages. She vanished into the vast, anonymous labyrinth of the federal penitentiary system, her name becoming a regional shorthand for virulent prejudice meeting its just and ruinous end. Life in the Cedar Ridge Loop slowly, cautiously, found a new, more inclusive rhythm. The annual cookout the following year felt profoundly different. Less performative tolerance, more genuine interaction and warmth. The blended sounds of English and Spanish felt natural, unremarkable, simply the sound of the neighborhood. Sometimes, Carlos would stand on his front porch in the late afternoon, watching Miguel, healthy and vibrant, chase that same bright red ball across the communal green, his laughter echoing freely in the sweet-smelling air. He'd see Elena chatting easily with neighbors from all backgrounds, sharing gardening tips, comparing recipes, bridging worlds with effortless grace. Near the entrance to the loop, on a newly installed flagpole approved unanimously by the reformed HOA board after thoughtful community discussion, the American flag flew proudly against the blue sky. And beside it, positioned respectfully, slightly smaller but flying just as freely in the same breeze, waved the vibrant green, white, and red flag of Mexico. It was a quiet but powerful daily testament to the lessons learned from one terrifying afternoon, a symbol of the community's ongoing commitment to ensuring that prejudice and hate would never again be allowed to block the path to compassion, to help, to simple human decency.